The story begins with Masamune, who used to be a disgusting, RIZZ-less, useless piece of loser, and got rejected by his crush for being a walking vending machine. But everything changes when he trades his loserness with dumbbells, and now, he's the hottest RIZZler in school, and all the girls in his school wants to suck his pickle as hard as possible. The story kicks off with Masamune stepping out of the shower, staring at himself in the mirror like he's the final boss in his own thirst trap. His sister, Chinatsu, calls him a narcissist, but Masamune insists it's just confidence and self-awareness. He then scolds her for munching on junk food first thing in the morning and tells her to stop barging into his room. Chinatsu, of course, ignores him like it's her full-time job. Looking at an old photo of his former chunky self, Masamune swears he'll never go back to being a human cholesterol factory. Just then, their mom, Kinu, calls them for breakfast. The table is loaded with donuts and fried chicken, but Masamune refuses to eat all those calories. His mom takes it personally, as if he just declared war on her cooking. On his way to school, Masamune notices all the girls checking him out. He wonders where this energy was when he was built like a potato. He stops by a tennis court and sees some girls playing, but suddenly, they run out, complaining about someone taking pictures. Turns out, some dude was snapping pics, but he insists he was just sending an email. Sure, buddy. Not wanting to get dragged into this mess, Masamune tries to sneak away, only to get recognized by a girl who tells her friend he transferred here just a week ago. Before he knows it, a bunch of other girls surround him, hyping him up for getting a perfect score on the entrance exam. Masamune realizes he's officially that guy now. He throws in a casual compliment about their hard work, walks off with a smirk, and thinks, yep, my plan is working. Later, he stumbles upon a crowd watching a dramatic confession. A guy named Sho is about to confess his love to someone they call the brutal princess. The students bet on whether this guy will pull it off, but the princess makes her entrance from a rooftop with a microphone. She proceeds to roast Sho's entire existence. Turns out, she had someone run a full background check on him. She exposes that he recently bought a gender-swap version of a famous novel and even points out that he has a single hair growing out of a mole on his chest. For that, she names him Mole-io and walks away, leaving the poor dude emotionally destroyed. As Masamune enters his classroom, he realizes that cancel culture is alive and well in this school. His anxiety skyrockets when he locks eyes with the Queen of Destruction herself, the brutal princess. During a break, Masamune dozes off, only to wake up from a nightmare of getting rejected. The class rep Futaba checks on him, happy to see he's settling in. Then his best friend Kojiru, or Koju for short, walks in with some food and offers him a bite. Masamune hesitates but eventually takes it, realizing he'll need to burn these calories off later. Koju praises him for being good at both studying and sports, but mentions that there's one other student who's just as talented. Right on cue, the brutal princess walks in and asks for Ayo. The whole room goes silent. No one answers, so she strolls up to Masamune and asks him directly. Before things get awkward, Ayo outs himself. She pulls out a love letter he wrote her, mocking him for thirsting over her in PE class. Assuming he has a thing for women in tights, she officially dubs him the Thirst Lover Prince before tearing his letter to shreds. After she leaves, Koju explains that she's both the beauty and the beast, with a deep hatred for men. Every guy who's ever confessed to her has walked away with a humiliating nickname, which is how she earned the title, the Brutal Princess. When Koju finally reveals her real name, Aki, Masamune is shook. He runs into the hallway, locking eyes with her again, but this time, there's serious tension. He's thrilled to have reunited with his old rival and is determined to make her regret everything. Later, Masamune observes Aki and realizes she's got a whole squad of loyal minions willing to jump off a cliff for her. Koju explains that most girls admire Aki for being brutally honest, but her closest ally is Yoshino. Masamune asks for the full scoop on Aki and learns that she prefers eating alone. He finds this suspicious. Koju warns him to drop it if he doesn't want to end up as the next public humiliation victim, but Masamune is too intrigued to let it go. When he loses track of Aki, fate sends Yoshino his way. He follows her to a gym storage room and decides to peek inside. Unfortunately, he gets jump scared by a spider and bursts in like a lunatic. Quickly recovering, he plays it cool, pretending he just accidentally walked in. Aki glares at him, telling him to mind his business, but Masamune notices something interesting. She's holding a lunchbox filled with high-calorie food. He casually points out that athletes eat a lot too, but then he spots several empty lunchboxes nearby. Suddenly, Aki's stomach growls and she confesses she has hypoglycemia, meaning she needs to keep her sugar levels in check. She's super insecure about her stomach rumbling and goes on a rant about how it makes her look bad. Masamune, deciding to be a decent person for once, leaves without teasing her. Before he exits, she warns him, if you tell anyone, you're dead. Determined to get along with Aki, Masamune tries to interact with her, but she keeps pushing him away. However, Koju notices that people think Aki is starting to soften up to him. Rumors begin spreading that they might end up dating. After school, Aki, feeling faint from hunger, sends Yoshino to grab her a snack. But as Yoshino leaves, Aki realizes she can't wait that long and decides to follow her. That's when Ayo, still salty from earlier, shows up, grabs her hair, and tries to get revenge for his public humiliation. He assumes she's dating Masamune and pulls out a pair of scissors, planning to give her an unwanted haircut. Before he can make his move, Masamune shows up ready to throw hands. Ayo, seeing blood trailing from Masamune's hand, suddenly looks like he owes someone money. Aki asks if Masamune is okay, but since he doesn't want to look weak, he casually says he's fine, even though internally, he's fighting the urge to scream like he just stubbed his toe on a coffee table. Now that he's saved her and knows her secret, he sees this as the perfect chance to get closer to Aki and put his master plan into action. Back in the day when he was a walking marshmallow, Masamune was bullied, partly because of his rich dad. Aki seemed like a way out, a beacon of hope, until she completely shattered his soul by rejecting him and calling him a pig's foot. Years later, he still holds a grudge, but instead of just sulking, he's dedicated his entire life to getting revenge. His goal? Make Aki fall for him so hard that when she finally confesses, he'll reject her so brutally, it might just become the next viral TikTok trend.
Oh my god! Wow!
The next day at school, Futaba notices the bandage on his hand and asks about it. Masamune plays it cool, saying he was just a little clumsy, when in reality he nearly lost a hand in the name of RIZZ. Soon he runs into Ayo, who awkwardly apologizes for his behavior. Masamune, being the bigger man, lets it slide. Later in the locker room, Koju notices a letter inside Masamune's locker. Koju immediately assumes it's a love letter, but when Masamune opens it, the only words written are pig's foot. His stomach drops. Someone knows. His entire cover might already be blown. During class, Masamune scans the room, trying to figure out which of the ladies sent the letter. His first suspect is Aki, but then he remembers. Aki is the queen of public humiliation. If she wanted to expose him, she'd do it with an audience, not through petty notes. As he's deep in thought, Koju and Futaba snap him out of it. Just then, he hears another student casually mention that his mom packed him pig's foot for lunch. Masamune almost has a heart attack right there. When the girls rush to check on him, he realizes if they ever find out he used to be built like a Snorlax, they wouldn't touch him with a 10-foot pole. Later in class, he imagines his classmates bullying him all over again and sheds a single tear. The girls? They assume he's just a sensitive guy deeply moved by the novel they're reading. After class, Masamune reflects on the 8 years he spent grinding to lose weight. If Aki finds out the truth, all that effort will go down the drain. As he stresses over who sent the letter, he notices a stampede of guys rushing to the canteen. Right behind them is Yoshino, trying to squeeze through to grab food for Aki, only to get shoved out like an NPC in a battle royale. Masamune watches her struggle and, after taking a good look at her uncharted territory, goes to check on her. Yoshino looks like she'd rather die than go back into that testosterone-infested chaos. Instead, she hands him a list of Aki's food requests. Masamune, ever the gentleman, fights through the battlefield and buys them for her. Once Yoshino finishes counting every single item twice, she turns to leave. But Masamune isn't done. He insists on walking with her. After all, he knows the food is for Aki. Yoshino, clearly terrified, tries to bolt. Masamune, sensing an opportunity, corners her for intimidation. But instead of spilling the tea, she just looks genuinely scared of Aki. He reassures her that no one's going to yell at her today, and convinces her to let him tag along. As they walk together, Masamune starts to think Yoshino is basically Cinderella, stuck under the rule of her evil stepmother. When they reach Aki, Yoshino hands over the food. Aki immediately starts roasting her for being lazy and useless. But the moment she takes a bite of her bun, she starts coughing and sends Yoshino to fetch some water. Masamune sees his chance. He casually strolls into the room and greets the brutal princess. Aki, seeing his bandaged hand, asks about it. Masamune, despite the pain, plays it cool. Aki, clearly flustered, hesitantly says she never meant to get him involved. Inside, Masamune is grinning like a villain. He's got a psychological advantage now. And if Aki's acting normal around him, that means she's not the one who sent that letter. Before he can say anything, Yoshino returns, only to faceplant straight into the floor. Her assets are on full display. Aki panics and tries to block Masamune's view, but ends up accidentally poking him in the eye. Yoshino hands them both drinks. Aki, trying to act all high and mighty, declares that she is humble and respectful of others. Masamune barely holds back a laugh. Aki is clearly annoyed that Yoshino is being too nice to him instead of just her. Then, as a finishing move, Masamune casually points out that she has ketchup on her nose. He leans in and rizzles her up, leaving her hot and bothered with no follow-up. As he walks away, Aki screams in frustration, while Yoshino notices Aki is blushing. Masamune, now feeling himself, decides to study his sister's romance manga to level up his RIZZ game. Meanwhile, as Masamune walks home, he starts plotting ways to get Aki's number. But just as he's deep in thought, he steps into a trap. Yoshino's trap, to be exact. Now, hanging upside down from a tree, Yoshino smirks and calls him by his old nickname, Pigsfoot. Masamune is shook. How does she know that name? Then it hits him. Yoshino used to work at Aki's mansion. After cutting him down, Yoshino reveals that her family has served Aki's family for generations. Masamune realizes Aki isn't just her friend, she's her master. He suddenly regrets ever letting his guard down around her. Determined to get his revenge, he confronts Yoshino, but to his utter shock, she offers to help him destroy Aki. The next day, Masamune observes Aki from afar. She's busy talking about her role in the school beautification committee. He wonders, can I really trust Yoshino? In the end, he decides to keep his plans to himself and focus on getting Aki's phone number first. Just then, Futaba shows up with a mountain of notes and asks him to help carry them. As they walk to class, Masamune tries to casually ask for Futaba's number, just for practice. But mid-sentence, he malfunctions. Why? Because he suddenly remembers his phone is basically a fancy calculator with 0 contacts. Completely embarrassed, he runs off and asks Koju if sharing his email also reveals his contacts. Koju says no, and Masamune sighs in relief, realizing no one will ever expose his NPC social life. Just then, a member of the beautification committee arrives, saying they need one more person. Futaba turns them down because she's got class rep duties. Masamune, he sees an opportunity. With a smirk, he steps up and volunteers. Got it. Here's the rewritten version with everything intact, just smoother and funnier. Masamune's efforts to get closer to Aki are working, which for some reason makes Futaba's panties drenched. Later that day, he shows up to help clean, hoping for some sloppy toppy, but instead just gets praised. Aki adores him, but Masamune is fuming inside. His RIZZ is getting him nowhere. As he sulks over the lack of progress, Futaba apologizes for making him help, but he tells her it's fine. She then starts blushing while talking about how sweet and selfless he is, and out of nowhere, she asks if he'd like to go to the movies with her. Masamune freezes. This is a date invitation. Seeing him hesitate, Futaba quickly backtracks, apologizing for being so forward. Then she leaves the classroom smiling. Masamune can't believe it. He's finally cool enough to be invited to Diddy's party. Just then, Aki walks in to grab a new bucket and immediately starts teasing him about his rising popularity. Masamune keeps his cool, saying it doesn't matter if he gets a proposal from someone he doesn't have feelings for. Aki raises an eyebrow. So, is there someone specific you do like? Masamune, in his most confident voice, says, you. Aki responds with a thank you. Masamune thinks she just accepted his confession and immediately asks for her number. But Aki casually says her phone is in for repairs, and they can exchange numbers once it's back. Masamune internally combusts. Next time he's on cleaning duty, Masamune waits for Aki, but instead he finds a letter that leads him on an elaborate treasure hunt around the school. After running all over campus like a lost puppy, the hunt eventually leads him back to where he started. He looks out the window and sees Aki holding up a decline sign. Masamune screams internally. Yoshino then appears out of nowhere and tells him he's too naive. If he lets her handle things, she can get Aki's address and set him up on real dates with her. Before he can react, Yoshino takes his phone and adds herself as a contact. Masamune is shook. The next day, Futaba drops a bomb. If they fail even one proficiency test, they'll have to take a month of supplementary classes. She's confident Masamune will be fine since he's smart. Masamune? He casually throws Koju under the bus, saying it's easy for him too. But then Koju reveals he barely scored in the single digits on the midterms and is running purely on vibes. Masamune is speechless. Futaba is horrified, but also secretly excited at the thought of Koju getting even thinner, because apparently she likes traps. Koju refuses to take extra classes, so Masamune decides to help him study, much to Futaba's delight, as her man-on-man fantasies start running wild. Later, Masamune takes Koju to the study room, but quickly realizes this might be a lost cause. That's when he spots Aki and Yoshino in the exact same situation. Turns out his Cinderella is dumber than she looks. During their conversation, Koju casually reveals that Masamune is prepping him for the test. Aki? She laughs in his face, calling it a dumber version of the blind leading the blind. Masamune, offended, challenges Aki to a study showdown. Whoever scores higher wins. If Masamune and Koju win, Aki has to go on a date with him. If Aki wins, Masamune has to let her give him an embarrassing nickname that he'll carry until graduation. Aki raises the stakes. If she wins, he also has to pay for her lunch indefinitely. Masamune, blinded by confidence, agrees. Koju, realizing they're screwed, starts sweating. But Masamune smirks. He knows Yoshino is on their side, so this is a guaranteed win. That night, Yoshino casually warns Aki to actually study, revealing that Masamune got a perfect score on the entrance exam, the first person in school history to do so. Aki panics. Yoshino, being a great friend, reassures her, before sliding her a romance novel, just in case she loses. Meanwhile, Masamune gets a late-night call from Yoshino. Since it's his first ever call with a girl, he acts like he's getting his V-card swiped. But when he asks for help, Yoshino straight up declines, saying he's on his own. The next day, Koju takes a practice test and scores a 9. Feeling defeated, Koju apologizes and says he'll ask Aki to nickname him too, so they can be losers together. Just then, Aki walks in and tests Masamune with a few quick questions. He answers all of them correctly, so Aki is shook. Masamune knows that if they want to win, Koju is going to have to bust his ass studying like never before. That night, they hit the books harder than ever. Masamune even does intense cardio to stay sharp. Later, he meets Koju at a restaurant for one last study session, completely unaware that Aki and Yoshino are watching him from outside. The next morning, Koju actually feels hopeful about the test. Masamune? He's pumped. Then, at the vending machine, Yoshino appears and apologizes for not helping. Masamune reassures her. It's fine, he and Koju are ready. Yoshino smiles, gives him a drink, and awkwardly scurries away. Right before the math test, Masamune suddenly feels a pain in his stomach. His eyes widen. It's laxatives. Yoshino poisoned him. He realizes she was the enemy all along. After barely surviving the test, Masamune storms out looking for Aki, only to find out she left early due to a fever. Yoshino confirms it. Masamune is confused. They won, without even fighting? Then it hits him. Yoshino didn't drug him. His own breakfast had gone bad. The next day, he learns he failed the math test because of it and has to take supplementary classes. As he sulks over being the only one who failed in his class, he enters the room, only to see Aki sitting there too. Later, Yoshino calls to tell him that Aki will go on a date with him on Sunday and they'll meet at the station. When he gets there, Masamune spots Aki from a distance, dressed like a magical girl. She immediately attracts a ton of attention. When a fat Discord mod asks for a picture, Aki gets weirded out, but Masamune quickly saves her. As soon as the guy leaves, Aki turns to him and says, "Hurry up and start the date." But Masamune isn't moving until he gets an answer to one very important question. Why the hell are you dressed like an idiot? Aki mocks Masamune for not knowing the dress code and tells him that wearing a costume is a must to break the ice on a first date. She even learned this from the romance novel Yoshino gave her. Later, Masamune secretly calls Yoshino to report that her master is a menace to society. Yoshino, completely unbothered, tells him not to worry and to leave everything to her. Masamune knows Aki trusts Yoshino more than anyone, which makes manipulating her too easy. But what he doesn't get is, why is Yoshino helping him? Returning to Aki, he apologizes for not knowing about the dress code, but is secretly happy that Aki at least sees this as a date. Unfortunately, Aki shuts that down immediately. She's only being nice to him because Yoshino told her that after failing the test, he stopped eating and cried in the nurse's office all day, trying to flatline himself because he couldn't cope with failure. None of this is even remotely true, but Aki believes it because it came from Yoshino. Wanting to make him feel better, she agrees to spend the day with him. When they reach the movies, Masamune realizes Aki rented out the entire theater using Daddy's credit card. He sits next to her. Aki, too close. He moves 3 seats away. Aki, too far. After much nonsense, they settle for 1 seat apart and watch the movie, where a guy is chased by zombies. When the movie ends, Masamune notices that Aki is so terrified she can't even feel her legs. He asks why she chose a horror movie if she's this scared. Aki. Yoshino picked the tickets without asking me. Masamune face palms. Later at the restaurant, Aki eats like an unstoppable machine. Watching her devour food, Masamune realizes she's not as scary as she pretends to be. He remembers that she never used to eat this much as a kid. Aki explains that her bottomless appetite only started after a tragic incident in her past. Just then, a random little girl walks up to Aki and bluntly asks why she's dressed like a Twitch thought at a meet and greet. Aki proudly explains that dressing up is a necessary ritual for a first date. As she goes into unnecessary detail, Masamune gets secondhand embarrassment and drags her out of there. Once outside, he tells her that normal people don't dress like this. Aki suddenly realizes she's been making a fool of herself this entire time. Feeling bad, Masamune takes her to a boutique to get a change of clothes. While waiting, he suddenly hears Aki crying in the fitting room. Panicked, he rushes in to check on her, only for Aki to channel her inner Mike Tyson and knock him the hell out. Masamune wakes up in her lap. As he regains consciousness, he remembers the first time they met and realizes that, despite being harsh and brutal, Aki was also kind and gentle towards him. The moment Aki sees he's awake, she gets up and leaves. Masamune apologizes for scaring her earlier. On his way home, he updates Yoshino on everything that happened and asks why she's helping him. Yoshino casually explains that Aki has been acting weird lately, and getting dumped might just be the karma cleanse she needs to get back to her senses. Masamune jokes that waking up in her lap was way too risky because for a split second, he almost started liking her. But then she opened her sewer grate mouth, and all attraction vanished instantly. As they end the call, Yoshino's sister overhears, and is shocked to see Yoshino talking to someone other than Aki. She's just happy Yoshino is having fun. Meanwhile, Masamune dives into his sister's romance novels and spends all night studying them, determined to become the ultimate Ohio Rizzler. The next morning, Aki scolds Yoshino for making her dress like an idiot on her first date. Masamune watches from the shadows, feeling unstoppable thanks to his new romantic tactics. During supplementary class, he sits next to Aki and stares at her for the entire lecture. Aki, why aren't you looking at the board? Masamune, I only have eyes for you. Aki mentally files a restraining order. Later, it starts pouring rain. Masamune brings Aki an umbrella, dramatically declaring that he'll get wet for her sake. Then he sprints off, excited to see how she'll react. That night, Yoshino meets up with him and drops a bomb. Aki isn't impressed. She's creeped out. Masamune is shocked. Why are his RIZZ tactics not working? Yoshino advises him to back off and let time do its thing. She suggests he start ignoring Aki from now on. Then, like a badass villain in a shonen anime, she walks away. That night, Masamune reads another manga where the female lead falls for the male lead after he treats her like an Indian housewife. But he hesitates. If he does this, Aki might start hating him instead. The next day, Masamune runs into Aki in the hallway, but forces himself to walk past her without saying a word. Aki, confused, hands him back his umbrella. Masamune, dead silent. Aki, shooketh. Entering his class, Masamune takes a deep breath. What he just did was risky. This could ruin everything he's built so far. Later, in supplementary class, he ignores Aki again. Akise, shooketh X2. That day, Masamune leaves without saying a word. The next day, he expects Aki to beg for his attention. Instead, she ignores him. Masamune, Shuketh X3. Yoshino glares at him, silently warning him not to break character. Masamune, suffering, tries his hardest to keep ignoring Aki, but the stress takes a toll on his stomach. After returning from the restroom, he finds Aki waiting for him in the hallway. Aki, looking dead serious. We need to talk. Masamune expected her to be soft and vulnerable. Instead, she's in full brutal mode. His survival instincts kick in. He decides to skedaddle. Aki, oh hell no. She throws the umbrella at his head. Masamune, pain. When that doesn't stop him, she grabs him by the collar and pins him against the wall. As Aki aggressively yells slurs at him, Masamune realizes his fantasy of getting the sloppy toppy is officially dead. But then, Aki softens. With her eyes filled with tears, she quietly asks, "Why are you ignoring me?" Masamune suddenly feels attracted to her, but holds himself back and says, Masamune did it on purpose. He wanted to grab Aki's attention. Aki calls him an awful person for pulling such a stunt, but despite her harsh words, her body language is practically begging him to make her walk side to side. Masamune boldly says he wanted her attention because he likes her. Aki, caught off guard, asks, "What's there to like?" Despite some very obvious reasons, Masamune plays dumb. He needs to consult Yoshino before answering this. Later, he meets up with Yoshino, who is now convinced that he is an even bigger idiot than she originally thought. Masamune desperately begs for help, and Yoshino suggests he write Aki a letter. The next day, Masamune runs into Aki and hands her the letter. Aki, without even reading it, throws it in the trash and tells him she despises him. After dramatically running off, Yoshino appears. Masamune rants about the situation, impatiently asking Yoshino to do something. Yoshino sternly, "Sit back and let me handle it." Masamune, main character syndrome kicking in. Hell no. Meanwhile, Aki heads to a park to get some alone time, but worries she might get in trouble for skipping class. Feeling annoyed, she recalls following Masamune into the park and watching him ask Yoshino for advice. This infuriates her. Masamune couldn't even come up with an answer on his own, and Yoshino betrayed her by meeting him behind her back. Frustrated, she throws away his umbrella. Right on cue, Yoshino appears. Even though Aki's face screams butthurt, she acts nonchalant and claims she doesn't give a rat's about who Yoshino befriends. Yoshino gently holds Aki's face in her hands, showing affection. Yoshino, are you upset about Masamune? Aki, proudly. I will never cry over a man. They are manipulative liars. Yoshino, seeing straight through her act. Anyway, Masamune actually likes you, and we both know you like him too. Having said enough, Yoshino peacefully exits, leaving Aki to wrestle with her emotions. As Aki walks home, she recalls that tragic incident from her past, the moment she became cold towards boys. While deep in thought about Masamune's massive dong schlong, she absentmindedly steps into the road at a red light. Before she can become roadkill, Masamune grabs her and pulls her back. Masamune scolds her for being so reckless. Aki, irritated. This has nothing to do with you. Masamune clapping back, I don't know what I'd do without you. Aki, suddenly feeling some type of way, leans in to kiss him. Just as the moment gets serious, the car driver runs over to check if they're okay, completely ruining the mood. Aki, internally thanking God for the save, is about to leave when suddenly, a mysterious girl leans into Masamune, locking eyes with him. Mysterious girl, I've been longing to see you. Masamune, confused hot guy noises. Aki, shocked. Masamune has no idea who she is, but Aki watches in horror. Plot twist of the century. The mystery girl presses her juicy melons against Masamune, grabs his hands, and dramatically says, God must have arranged this moment. I've been thinking about you day and night. Have you been thinking about me too? Masamune, still clueless? Ah yes, another episode of Hot Guy Problems. Just then, her driver, Shido, reminds her that they're running late. Before leaving, she promises to meet Masamune again. As she drives off, Aki turns to Masamune, angrily demanding to know who that girl was. Masamune, completely honest. I have no idea. Aki, not buying it, stomps away. Meanwhile, in the car, Shido reminds the girl that she is a member of the Fujiya family. The mystery girl smirks. This is going to be an interesting game. The main part is about to begin. See you in the next part.